In 1949 in the United States, we see a surge in the number of sightings over nuclear and military facilities, especially at Los Alamos, New Mexico. The most common report is a luminous orb, often green with an orange tail. This same color luminous orb is also reported over a number of military bases that have missiles. Some orbs are reported to track and circle missiles in flight. 1949 also brought us some close encounters of the second, third, and fourth kinds. It's January of 1949, and we're in Cincinnati, Ohio. We have a close encounter of the first kind. Around 11 p.m., two air traffic controllers at the Cincinnati airport see a huge white ball of light circle the airport twice over a period of about 5 minutes. Both of the air traffic controllers flee the tower in panic. It's February 17th of 1949. We're somewhere in France, and we have a close encounter of the third kind. French peasant Alain Berard, at an unknown place in France, at night saw a large object landing not far from his farm, with a flash of green fire illuminating the entire sky. Berard, who was at his bedroom window, did not wake his wife, but took his rifle and descended into the courtyard, moving towards the fallen thing in the middle of his property. He is said to have claimed later that when the object passed over the few trees at the bottom of the courtyard, he saw a large, dark mass from which 3 figures moved towards him. He claimed that he got very amazed because those beings, though moving upon short and stocky legs, had no head. While he tried to keep his cool, he pointed his rifle and shot 3 times at them, and the horrible figures remained still for a moment, then disappeared, mingling into the darkness of that giant black object, which a moment later took off, disappearing with another blinding green flame. It's February 20th of 1949. We're in the town of Maiten in the Chubut province of Argentina, and we have a close encounter of the third kind. According to an article in the national newspaper La Razón, a very excited salesman came to a police officer at his military station. The salesman claimed that about 20 kilometers from town he had met a UFO. 3 human figures dressed with strange suits emerged. They had something flashing in their headgear and were connected to the UFO by something like cords. They signaled the witness to stop his car.
It's February 23, 1949, and we're at Chile's Antarctic Captain Arturo Pratt base, and we have a close encounter of the first kind. Captain Arturo Pratt Base is a Chilean Antarctic research station located at Greenwich Island in the South Shetland Islands, Antarctica. Opened February 6, 1947 by the first Chilean Antarctic expedition, it is the oldest Chilean Antarctic station. Commander Augusto Vars Orrego, head of the base, said on several occasions during the bright Antarctic night he and his men saw flying saucers one above the other turning at tremendous speeds. Photos and video were taken of the craft, but the Chilean Navy seized them and classified them as top secret.
It's May 6th of 1949, and we're in Saratov, Russia. We have a close encounter of the second kind. A decorated Soviet test pilot named Praskin was flying over the Volga River in Russia, 25 miles north of the city of Saratov, when he saw a cigar-shaped UFO that was similar to the one he observed in June of 1948. He gave chase and attempted to approach the strange craft at about 36,000 feet. The UFO shot a bright beam of light at him, which temporarily blinded him. The plane's electrical systems failed and communications were lost. The plexiglass canopy was damaged, causing the cabin's seal to be broken. Praskin barely made an emergency landing on the Volga shallows and lost consciousness. In the general area is the Saratov aircraft plant, where experimental planes were flown. Combined with the nearby Kapustin Yar and Krasny Kut missile ranges, plenty subjects of interest were provided for UFOs. It's May 21st of 1949. We're in Hanford, Washington, and we have a close encounter of the first kind over an important U.S. nuclear facility. Hanford was a small agricultural community in Benton County, Washington. It and White Bluffs were depopulated in 1943 in order to make room for the nuclear production facility known as the Hanford site. Today, the Hanford site is a decommissioned nuclear production complex operated by the United States federal government. It has also been known as Site W and the Hanford Nuclear Reservation. Established in 1943 as part of the Manhattan Project, the site was home to the Hanford Engineer Works and B reactor, the first full-scale plutonium production reactor in the world. Plutonium manufactured at the site was used in the first atomic bomb, which was tested in the Trinity nuclear test, and in the Fat Man bomb used in the bombing of Nagasaki. During the Cold War, the project expanded to include 9 nuclear reactors and 5 large plutonium processing complexes, which produced plutonium for most of the more than 60,000 weapons built for the U.S. nuclear arsenal. Nuclear technology developed rapidly during this period, and Hanford scientists produced major technological achievements. The town of Richland, established by the Manhattan Project, became self-governing in 1958, and residents were allowed to purchase their properties. After sufficient plutonium had been produced, the production reactors were shut down between 1964 and 1971. Many early safety procedures and waste disposal practices were inadequate, resulting in the release of significant amounts of radioactive materials into the air and the Columbia River, resulting in higher rates of cancer in the surrounding area. The Hanford site became the focus of the nation's largest environmental cleanup. Cleanup activity was still ongoing in 2023, with over 10,000 workers employed on cleanup activities. Today, Hanford hosts a commercial nuclear power plant, the Columbia Generating Station, and various centers for scientific research and development, such as the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, the Fast Flux Test Facility, and the LIGO Hanford Observatory. In 2015, it was designated as part of the Manhattan Project National Historical Park. Tourists can visit the site and B-reactor. Project Green Run was a secret Air Force experiment that released Hanford's largest single dose of radioactive iodine-131. On the night of December 2, 1949, at the behest of the military, scientists at Hanford let 7,000 to 12,000 curies of iodine-131 into the air, where it rode the wind as far as 200 miles. For a sense of scale, the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant accident released an estimated 15 to 24 curies of iodine-131, and the Chernobyl accident 35 million to 49 million curies. On the afternoon of May 21st, Hanford radar station personnel of the U.S. Air Force 637th Air Defense Control Center saw a silvery disc-shaped object and confirmed it on radar. A U.S. Air Force F-82 fighter pilot was scrambled from Moses Lake Air Force Base to intercept the object that was still hovering over the Hanford site at about 20,000 feet. When the F-82 arrived, the disc suddenly accelerated away to the south before the F-82 could intercept it. This was just one of many UFO incidents that have occurred over the Hanford site. It's June 10th of 1949, we're in Anchorage, Alaska, and we have a close encounter of the fourth kind. A disk, first visible at about 10,000 feet elevation at a distance of about 10 miles, became noticeable as it proceeded south-southwest and emerged from behind the southern profile of the Chugach Range. It then turned north and flew along the western edge of the mountains as it headed towards Anchorage, coming down to about 5,000 feet in elevation. The disk had a slightly curved underside, a wider band slightly below the midpoint, and a dome-shaped top with windows. The windows looked nearly clear yellow, as if from heat, and the craft was that color with slight glowing appearance of hot metal showing green, blue, and orange very slightly. The disk began to wobble as it descended, and it was obvious it was about to crash. There was no sound while it was in the air, although one expected to hear something, and there was no sound from the impact, but there was a difference in sound, possibly a very low vibration. The next day, the witness was told that a group of government employees had been sent out to find any remaining debris. They located the crash scene, created their findings, and sent them to Wright-Patterson. The witness was a child when they observed this, in the company of adults. Because this occurred so very long ago, they're not sure the date, but have given their best estimate. It's June 22nd of 1949, and we're at Oak Ridge National Laboratories in Tennessee. We have a close encounter of the first kind. Oak Ridge National Laboratories was formed as part of the Manhattan Project and was created on some isolated farmland in Tennessee. It has been and continues to be one of the United States' most important nuclear research facilities. Its scientific programs focus on materials, nuclear science, neutron science, energy, high-performance computing, environmental science, systems biology, and national security, sometimes in partnership with the state of Tennessee, universities, and other industries. ORNL has several of the world's top supercomputers, including Frontier, ranked by the top 500 as the world's most powerful. The lab is a leading neutron and nuclear power research facility that includes the Spallation Neutron Source, the High-Flux Isotope Reactor, and the Center for Nanophase Materials Sciences. The UFO incursion incident. At Oak Ridge National Laboratories, a teacher and a scientist watched 2 delta-shaped UFOs and a disk fly over the nuclear research facility at around 7 p.m. The objects appeared to be metallic and flew slowly towards the northwest, seen for about 15 minutes. It's 1949, and we're at Los Alamos National Laboratories in New Mexico. We have a variety of close encounters of the first kind occurring throughout the year, yet again over another sensitive United States nuclear research facility. Los Alamos National Laboratory is one of the 16 research and development laboratories of the United States Department of Energy. Best known for its central role in helping develop the first atomic bomb, Los Alamos is one of the world's largest and most advanced scientific institutions. Los Alamos was established in 1943 as Project Y, a top-secret site for designing nuclear weapons under the Manhattan Project during World War II. Chosen for its remote yet relatively accessible location, it served as the main hub for conducting and coordinating nuclear research, bringing together some of the world's most famous scientists, among them numerous Nobel Prize winners. The town of Los Alamos, directly north of the lab, grew extensively through this period. After the war ended in 1945, Project Y's existence was made public and it became known universally as Los Alamos. Today, Los Alamos conducts multidisciplinary research in fields such as national security, space exploration, nuclear fusion, renewable energy, medicine, nanotechnology, and supercomputing. In 1949, there were many cases of green and orange orbs of light along with disks overflying the labs. Many of them were not formally reported, but a couple were. Our first incident is on March 8th at around 6:30 in the evening. Two guards, Patterson and Lang, from guard stations 103 and 106, reported that they saw an intense white or aluminum-colored object moving horizontal, then descending from 800 miles per hour to slower than a twin-engine airplane. It flew towards the southeast at the altitude of the cloud layer. Another reported case occurred on May 31st, although the details are a little bit slim. A man observed 13 disks over one of our nuclear test sites for 45 minutes. White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico also experienced a number of UFOs flying over their facilities and around some of our most important new missiles. On February 24th, the first U.S. rocket to reach what can be regarded as outer space is launched from White Sands. The rocket, a modified German V-2 ballistic missile, attained the unprecedented altitude of 244 miles, putting it well above the more or less arbitrary Kármán line later established by the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale as the dividing line between the edge of the Earth's atmosphere and geospace. The Kármán line is 62 miles high. On April 24th, a balloon crew was at the White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico, together with personnel from the U.S. Navy Special Devices Center, for a special skyhook flight to be undertaken for the Office of Naval Research Activity. While tracking the balloon with an ML-47 theodolite, they detected a UFO. Because they had an actual weather balloon aloft at the same time, they were able to make a comparison, and the UFO is quite different. The object was an ellipsoid about 2.5 times as long as it was wide. It was gleaming white in color and did not have a metallic or reflected shine. Towards the underside near the rear, the gleaming white became a yellow light. The object, readily visible to the naked eye and seen by all members of the group, filled the field of the theodolite's 25-power scope. Its rapid movement unfortunately prevented them from obtaining a hard or clear focus, and no good detail was observable. It disappeared in a sharp climb after having been visible to the group for about 60 seconds. On the morning of May 31st, an object was observed using optical instruments. One object, about 1 foot across, was observed by several witnesses near a missile. On June 10th, a team of Navy engineers and technicians under the command of Captain Robert McLaughlin watched two circular white disks pace a V-2 rocket during its test launch from the White Sands Missile Range. As the missile accelerated to about 1,430 miles per hour, the UFOs climbed after it, passed through its exhaust, passed the missile, and climbed out of sight. 5 separate observation and tracking posts scattered around the nearby mountains and not in communication with one another reported observing this performance. One of the posts tracked a similar UFO several minutes later as it sped west against the wind. It's July of 1949, and we're in Westminster, Massachusetts. We have a close encounter of the fourth kind. 12-year-old Betty Aho was in the forest. A 2.5-foot tall being emerged from a hole in the ground. It had a large pear-shaped head, dark eyes, a slit for a mouth, and a broad chest. It wore tight coveralls and had brown and rough-textured skin. The being pushed a small luminous ball button on its chest. Benny then reports a period of missing time that could not be accounted for. It's August 20th of 1949. We're in Death Valley, California, and we have a close encounter of the third kind. Two seasoned prospectors, Buck Fitzgerald and Macy Garney, were out prospecting when a disc craft flew overhead at about 300 miles per hour and crashed into the dunes. Two little men jumped out of the 24-foot diameter craft and, upon seeing the two prospectors, ran away. They chased the little men in the intensely hot 138-degree weather, but could not catch up with them and lost them in the dunes. By the time they got back to where the craft had been, it was gone. Buck said that they looked human, but were very small like dwarfs. It's August 19th of 1949. We're in Norwood, Ohio, and we have a close encounter of the second kind. A local church hires an Army surplus searchlight to advertise their carnival. The retired soldier who was running the light spotted a UFO in the sky and trains the light on it. The object is more luminous than the searchlight. The object appears as a luminous orb and is photographed and videos recorded from multiple witnesses. One of the videos, when analyzed frame by frame, shows the object actually bending the light beam towards it. After a while, the light takes off at a high rate of speed. It's October 28th of 1949, and we're in Montecarotto, Italy. We have a close encounter of the second kind. At 6 o'clock in the morning, several independent observers watched a 25-feet-long cigar-shaped object as it flew 300 feet overhead. Tree branches thrashed about as it passed by. It's November 14th of 1949. We're in the Strait of Hormuz, and a U.S. Navy vessel is encountering 3 USOs. Commander J.R. Bodler of the U.S. Navy stated that on a clear moonless night they were passing through the Strait of Hormuz when the third mate called him to the bridge to show him something he thought he should see. He saw what looked like a band of light on the horizon that seemed to pulsate like the aurora borealis. When they looked at it with binoculars, it became clear that the light was actually in the water and heading towards their ship. As the light got closer, they could see that the pulsations seemed to start at the center of the band and flow outward towards its extremities. When the object was about a mile from the ship, it was apparent that the disturbance was roughly circular in shape, about 1,000 to 1,500 feet in diameter. The pulsations could now be seen to be caused by a revolving motion of the entire pattern about a rather ill-defined center, with streaks of light like the beams of searchlights radiating outward from the center and revolving in a counterclockwise direction like the spokes of a gigantic wheel. For several minutes, the vessel occupied the approximate center of the phenomena. Slightly curved bands of light crossed the bow, passed rapidly down the port side from bow to stern, and up the starboard side from aft forward. The luminosity was sufficient to make portions of the vessel's upper works quite visible. The bands of luminance seems to pass a given point at about half-second intervals. As may well be imagined, the effect was weird and impressive in the extreme, with the vessel seeming to occupy the center of a huge pinwheel whose spokes consisted of phosphorescent luminance revolving rapidly about the vessel as a hub. The central hub of the phenomena drew gradually to starboard and passed aft, becoming more and more distant on the starboard quarter. While it was still in sight, another one was seen on the starboard bow. This one was slightly smaller and a bit less brilliant. Its center passed slowly aft on the starboard side, with the pattern of revolving luminous spokes clearly defined. It was his impression that the actual illumination was caused by the natural phosphorescence in the water, periodically stimulated by regular waves of energy. The shape of the pinwheel, the well-defined spokes, the revolutions about the center, and the speed at which each band of light traversed the water all preclude the possibility of this phenomena being caused by schools of fish, porpoises, or similar cause. About half an hour later, a third one was seen, which was even smaller than the second. Its diameter was not over 800 to 1,000 feet, and compared to the other two, it was unimpressive. It was first observed much closer to the vessel than had been the case with the others. Whether this was due to its lesser brilliance or the fact that it came into being at a comparatively close range could not be determined. It's December 4th of 1949, and we're in Barra, Mansa, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and we have a very interesting close encounter of the fourth kind. Mario Restier, 17, was on the way to his father when he noticed a strange disc-shaped craft. It came low above some trees without any sound at all and landed 45 feet from the road. It was about 45 feet in diameter. He was then talked to from the ship in Portuguese not to be afraid. He went on board in spite of being afraid. Inside, he saw 2 persons of his own size in peculiar clothes. He asked them if they believed in God and got the answer that God is the only one. This made him feel safer. He was then asked if he wanted to go on a special trip, and he agreed. He was shown around the ship and told to stay in a special room where a tub of liquid was that they said was necessary to be in through the accelerations. Then he fell asleep. When he awoke, he saw gigantic transparent domes miles in extent, covering the whole city in such a way that where one ended, another began, and they were connected. He got some fruits in a room where he was taken, reminding him of tropical fruits, which they said was a highly purified food that provided no need for bathroom visits later. These people said they lived around 300 years, their eyes were blue or green, and the mouth small. He noticed no hair on their skin. He also saw women and children there, but the people on the return ship made him think more of robots than of people. He was shown different factories and was allowed to take back some peculiar material, a sheet of special metal. He was brought back home when asked, the same way, in a bathtub of liquid in a disc craft. He was dropped off close to where he'd been picked up, but not exactly at the same spot. When he got to his father's place 10 minutes later, he learned that while he thought he was gone for only 3 days, it was actually April 14th of 1950, over 4 months later. His father was upset as he had been all over Rio looking for him during that time. Mario was still confused because it seemed like he had only been gone for a few days. Mario had with him a little square piece of metal that he had been given to bring back, and he showed it to his father. It could not be burned or broken, and helped to convince his father that he was not lying or hallucinating. His father advised him to keep silent about his experience and not tell anybody unless they think he is crazy. After his return, Mario was suddenly compelled to begin feverishly studying nuclear physics, electronics, optics, general physics, and so on. Up to this point, his formal education had been high school and a TV repair course. Although he went on to get married and have children, he continued to pursue opportunities to build the craft and engine that had been shown to him at the factories and on the screens.